Educating the mind is no education at all. Educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all.
Greetings. I want to take a moment to personally thank you for enrolling on this course on how to develop gratitude, a beginner's guide to happiness. I am thrilled to have you on this journey towards cultivating gratitude and experiencing the profound impact it can have on your happiness and well-being. So gratitude is a practice that has truly transformed my own life, and I'm excited to share my knowledge, insights, and practical exercises with you throughout this course. Together, we'll explore the various aspects of gratitude, delve into its benefits, and discover how to integrate gratitude into your daily life. I encourage you to approach this course with an open mind and a willingness to embrace gratitude as a mindset and a way of life. Each module will provide you with valuable lessons, exercises, and assignments designed to deepen your understanding and practice of gratitude. In the upcoming lessons, we'll explore topics such as the power of gratitude, journaling, techniques for shifting perspective, gratitude in relationships, and much more. I promise you that these lessons will equip you with the tools and insights needed to transform your mindset and experience lasting happiness and fulfillment. I am genuinely excited to be your guide on this gratitude journey. Remember, your active participation and dedication to the course will enhance your learning experience and amplify the positive impact of gratitude in your life. Thank you once again for choosing this course and investing in your own well-being. I can't wait to see the incredible transformations that await you on this gratitude-filled adventure. Now let's dive in and begin our exploration of gratitude together. In this lesson, we will explore practical strategies to cultivate an attitude of gratitude in our daily lives. You will learn techniques to shift your perspective, embrace positive thinking, and integrate gratitude into your routines. By incorporating these strategies, you will develop the habit of gratitude and experience its transformative effects on your overall mindset and well-being. In our daily lives, to cultivate gratitude as a practice. So gratitude is a skill that can be developed through intentional practice. It requires cultivating awareness.
Are you looking for a unique way to express your personal style? Look no further than our advancing mindset, merchandise. Our products are designed to challenge you and push you to think outside the box. From our unique clothing to our thought-provoking designs, you will find something that truly reflects your personality. Plus, our high-quality materials ensure that you will feel comfortable and confident every time you wear it. Don't settle for ordinary. Purchase our advancing mindset merchandise today and show the world your unique style.
Avengers.
Avengers.
Denzel Washington.
Denzel Washington.
Eddie.
I don't believe this.
That's true.
It is.
Denzel Washington.
Denzel Washington.
I don't believe this.
That's true.
It is.
Educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. Educating the mind without educating the heart educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. Educating the mind without educating the heart
Is this going to be enough, do you think, in your opinion, to put a floor under this property market? How substantial, how significant do you think these measures will be?
Well, I think the first take is I think these are very helpful measures. I mean, compared to the policy that we have been having in the past year or two, and I think it's also very important, significant signal to the market that what the government is changing its tone or the priority of the policy making. So from just leaving the real estate to itself to I think it is trying to put in some of the floor to the property market. I think by lowering the interest rate or by allowing a greater portion of the housing prices to be paid through mortgage, this is really providing some incentive for the home buyers to consider the real estate market again. However, I think for the moment, I do not think that is sufficient to attract enough buyers to stabilize the market for two reasons. One is I think the housing market is still relatively sluggish, especially given the high prices relative to the income or relative to people's expectation of where their income will be. I think it's still quite expensive. I think the more important thing is over the past 3 years or so, housing prices have been coming down, not going up. And as we know about the bubble theory, people tend to buy assets only when they see a great potential of making money, not losing money. So as long as that expectation is not changing, I do not think the softening of the lending requirements or the reduction of the mortgage rate will have a significant impact on how people and households perceive the housing market in general.
Okay, that's really, really interesting context, Professor. The other key proposal that came through, it is still a proposal it seems, but we're getting a bit more detail on it, is a proposal for local governments to buy up excess inventory, unsold properties, unsold units, for local governments to buy those up. How significant could that be? And to what extent is this shifting the debt load from the real estate companies to local governments and state-owned banks?
I think this is a little bit similar to the bailing out of the financial institutions going through the great financial crisis. So in a way, I think those real estate developers are already in a fairly dire situation. So without the government stepping in, it is very likely that almost all the private real estate developers will go into distress, I think, by the end of the year. So I think in a way, it is probably an option that has to be taken for some kind of government credit to support the real estate sector and the real estate developer. That being said, I think we're talking about trillions of RMBs worth of real estate on the market. So whether the local government will have enough resources to build all those vacant or apartments to be finished, I think that remains to be seen. There's another logistic challenge, which is how do we make the distinction about whether you should buy up this project versus the other ones? There will be some rent seeking and there will be some moral hazard issues in the implementation of the policy. So in a way, I think it is encouraging to see the local government stepping in to stabilize the market. But I think in the end, unless the central government is stepping in and extend its own credit to the real estate market, it is a little difficult or a little too premature for us to believe that we're out of the woods. I think there's still a lot of empty and unfinished projects on the market for the moment.
Okay, really interesting. We also, of course, had some significant economic data crossing today from China, and the consumer seems to be still challenged, and we can probably tie that to the real estate sector as well. Professor, there's an argument for some that China needs to shift from investment-led growth to consumer-led growth. Do you buy into that argument, and are steps being taken to get to that point?
Yes, I have been a very strong advocate for the transition from the investment-driven to the consumption-driven growth model in the past decade or so. I think real estate has been a very hindering factor in the past decade because real estate has been crowding out the household consumption because there's so much money has been poured into buying the apartment and servicing the mortgage. Unfortunately, I think we're seeing the flip side of the story with the softening in the housing market. Even though people probably do have more disposable income at the moment, they're also losing the confidence that their houses will be more expensive in the future than now, or their jobs will be paying more than they did in the past. So I think we're talking about a transition, but this is not an easy transition. I think for that, the government has to be more committed to providing both social welfare programs and some of the incentive or stimulus or a subsidy. In the future than now, where their jobs will be paying more than they did in the past. So I think we're talking about a transition, but this is not an easy transition. I think for that, the government has to be more committed to providing both social welfare programs and some of the incentive or stimulus or a subsidy.
The largest single constellation of satellites orbiting our planet is run by a mercurial individual who needs no introduction. It's this guy.
Ignition and liftoff. Go Falcon.
His company SpaceX operates Starlink, whose fleet of satellites beam high-speed internet from the sky to about 2.5 million people in places like this, rural communities, or out at sea, or living the van life, or on a battlefield.
It achieves this by maintaining a vast relay network in low Earth orbit. That's the area higher than a jetliner, but below a GPS satellite.
Right now, Starlink has more than 5,600 satellites in orbit, and that number could probably be out of date while you're watching this video. At one point, SpaceX envisioned launching up to 42,000 satellites.
And it accomplished all this in less time than it took James Cameron to make a second Avatar movie. But this speed and relative success has raised eyebrows, concerned ones in government, and excited ones in the boardrooms of potential rivals. So, with the commodification of low Earth orbit officially underway, can Starlink survive increased scrutiny and keep its head start?
The story of Starlink is one of rapid innovation. It's essentially a company trying to disrupt a somewhat complacent marketplace with an entirely new idea and a new ambitious model for providing internet coverage.
It's also a story that necessarily starts with SpaceX, and hence Mr. Musk himself.
SpaceX has been going nearly 20 years now. Starlink as a concept was first mentioned by Elon in 2014, and in 2015, the plan really started to be developed in terms of building the satellites. 4 years later, the first 60 were in the air, and now there are 5,000 globally.
That's fast, and speed's kind of Starlink's thing. Customers can get set up in minutes, and download speeds, although known to fluctuate, are on par with a basic fiber optic connection from your local ISP.
Launching a Starlink as a consumer is effectively taking your bot, pushing it out, you go out into a field, and you're ready to do business.
And this is what we get from Starlink. Instruction: 3 pictures, no words. This side is Starlink, going up to space and back. This side is the fiber broadband. So Starlink is more than twice as quick on the download, and on the upload, about the same.
At 6 years old, Starlink's a relative newcomer to the $138 billion satellite services industry, which for decades has relied on satellites in geostationary orbit.
The disadvantage with these kinds of constellations is that these geo satellites are massive. They're built to be the size of buses, and they take years to develop and build, and then years to launch and operate, and they can be quite expensive. Prior to Starlink, most of these geo constellations would tap into modified sat phones. So you probably had seen them, big, bulky phones that were specifically geared towards tapping into the satellites that were thousands of miles away.
Which means they're not really suitable to form the backbone of a high-speed internet service.
Starlink, in contrast, actually sits in low Earth orbit. The reason you do that is you reduce the latency speed, and latency is the time it takes for the data to move between the satellite and the Starlink terminal on the ground.
It's similar to why your smartphone's 5G speeds tend to be faster the closer you are to a cell tower. Using satellites instead gives Starlink a first-mover advantage. And, of course, being the child of a rocket company doesn't hurt.
They own their own rocket, and that is just kind of a straight shot to orbit to get their Starlink satellites where they need to go. Starlink does have that advantage for potentially bringing in more revenue for a company like SpaceX that is limited when it comes to the kinds of customers it can advertise to for its Falcon 9 rocket launch.
The potential for facilitating telecommunications from space hasn't escaped other massive tech companies. Google tried it with stratospheric balloons and Meta with drones, but neither hit the mark. And there's at least one other billionaire thinking along the same lines and ready to nip at Starlink's heels. This guy, who you may have bought a book from.
Project Kuiper is the most obvious direct competitor to SpaceX. They have plans to launch 3,000 satellites into low Earth orbit by 2029. They want half of those up by 2026. Amazon has a lot of the same benefits that SpaceX has. They have their own rocket company, but in that Jeff Bezos's Blue Origin will be one of the rocket providers that sends their satellites up into space.
The ease of access to Starlink also means it's harder to know where and how it's being used.
Starlink has been used in Ukraine during the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. There were threats of turning it off by Elon at one point over seemingly moral concerns. There have also been efforts by Russia to block the service.
Now that has come with some controversy because it was revealed that Elon Musk actually opted not to provide connectivity during a skirmish between Ukraine and Russia.
It's not the only conflict zone that Starlink is being used in. There's a wide-ranging set of conflicts and war zones where these things are finding themselves in the wrong hands. It's been reported by Bloomberg that they're being used in Sudan, in Somalia.
Amazon could figure out the security issues before it launches, and that could give it a competitive edge.
Starlink is growing. SpaceX recently boasted 2.6 million customers of the system, and the company has also been making deals with businesses and the Defense Department. They recently made a deal with John Deere.
Starlink is currently the best service for a lot of these customers. If you can find a comparable service that's almost as cheap and provides roughly the same service, you're certainly going to be more tempted to move towards it.
SpaceX and other companies pursuing global satellite internet have espoused the potential marketplace. There are potentially billions of people that are unconnected by traditional internet right now that could tap into this system. The question really becomes, can they afford it? And is that enough to sustain Starlink and make it a profitable business?
News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Karen Moscow. China has announced its most forceful attempt yet to shore up the beleaguered property market, easing mortgage rules and encouraging local governments to buy unsold homes from developers for conversion into affordable housing. Bloomberg's Loretta Chen has more.
So we're saying this is one of the strongest measures we've seen from the Chinese government, I think, in the few years, actually, to prop up the property market. They've done a lot, trying to stimulate demand for homes. And now what they're doing is essentially to reduce that minimum down payment ratio from 20% for first-time buyers to 15%.
And that's Bloomberg's Loretta Chen. Turning to the Middle East now, dozens of Israeli protesters attacking a truck in the occupied West Bank, beating its driver and setting it on fire in an apparent attempt to prevent aid from reaching Gaza. This according to the Israeli military. This comes as trucks carrying badly needed aid for the Gaza Strip rolled across a newly built U.S. floating pier in the besieged enclave for the first time as Israeli restrictions on border crossings and heavy fighting hindered food and other supplies from reaching people there. We get more with Bloomberg Government Congress reporter Zach Cohen.
It used to be that you could get 500 truckloads a day into Gaza through some of these crossings, whether it be Rafah, where many civilians are sheltering during the ongoing war, or some of the northern crossings that have been besieged by this fighting. But this pier, which has been very delicate diplomatically, there are no actually U.S. troops that have actually landed in Gaza as part of the construction, which obviously makes it very difficult. And so this is sort of a stopgap that the U.S. has put in place with Israeli cooperation to try to get some of this aid through while they try to work on broadening these land crossings.
And that's Bloomberg's Zach Cohen. Meanwhile, Israel is denying it's committing genocide in Gaza after South Africa filed a request at the International Court of Justice for emergency measures to stop what it called the destruction of the Palestinian enclave. A member of Israel's legal team said Israel does what it can to protect civilians in Gaza, but is continuing military operations in Rafah in order to dismantle Hamas.
They have vowed to try and repeat the atrocities of 7 October many times over.
And South Africa presented its case to the UN court yesterday and described Rafah, the southernmost city in Gaza, as the final stand. Severe thunderstorms have hit southeastern Texas for the second time this month, and Houston's mayor says at least 4 people are dead. There also have been windows blown out of high-rise buildings, downed trees, and power outages for more than 900,000 customers in the Houston area. The storms also moved into neighboring Louisiana and left more than 215,000 customers there without power. Flood watches and warnings remain for Houston and areas to the east, including eastern Louisiana into central Alabama. It's an off day in the hush money trial of Donald Trump. Yesterday, his attorneys grilled the prosecution's star witness, Michael Cohen. We get the latest from Bloomberg law host June Grasso.
Trump's lawyer, Todd Blanche, grilled Michael Cohen for hours yesterday about possible inconsistencies in his trial testimony and his well-documented history of lying under oath, questioning whether he really got approval from Trump for the hush money payment. Blanche made some inroads in undercutting Cohen's credibility and even undercutting some of Cohen's testimony at the trial. Cohen will be back on the stand for more cross-examination on Monday when trial resumes. In New York, June Grosso, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, June, thank you. Russian President Vladimir Putin said today that Moscow's offensive in Ukraine's Kharkiv region aims to create a buffer zone, but has no plans to capture the city. He spoke to reporters on a visit to China, and he also said Russia and China are interested in increasing their oil and gas trade. Well, it's been a week of watching the meme stocks, and it looks like GameStop and AMC Entertainment Holdings will add to their two-day rout that erased about $7 billion in value. Shares of both are lower as GameStop reported preliminary net sales for the first quarter that missed the average analyst estimate. Investors will be watching for more comments from Federal Reserve officials today. Christopher Waller and Neil Kashkari will speak at separate events. And Brazil will host the 2027 Women's World Cup after a vote of FIFA's full membership chose the South American bid over a joint proposal from Belgium, the Netherlands, and Germany. Futures this morning, little change. NASDAQ futures up 0.1%, and the 10-year Treasury yield 4.39%. And that's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Karen Moscow, and this is Bloomberg.
Collaborate for a greener future at the Bloomberg Green Festival, a groundbreaking celebration of the thinkers, doers, and innovators leading the way. From design and culture to technology, science, and entertainment. Hear from inspirational speakers and immerse yourself in climate solutions. July 10th through 13th in Seattle. Title sponsor, Amazon. Official airline, Alaska Airlines. Get 20% off using promo code RADIO20 at BloombergLive.com/greenfestival. Collaborate for a greener future at the Bloomberg Green Festival, a groundbreaking celebration of the thinkers, doers, and innovators leading the way. From design and culture to technology, science, and entertainment. Hear from inspirational speakers and immerse yourself in climate solutions. July 10th through 13th in Seattle. Title sponsor, Amazon. Official airline, Alaska Airlines. Get 20% off using promo code RADIO20 at BloombergLive.com/greenfestival.
Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Hello, it's Maren Somerset Webb here. This week, our guest is John Warren, co-founder of Tellworth Investments and manager of the TM Tellworth UK Select Fund. He's got 18 years of investment experience, but that's not why we asked him on. He runs an absolute return fund, which is something that John and I find particularly interesting. So we talk about the way that works. But before we get to that very exciting conversation, as we always do, we start with what I think most of you consider to be the best part of the show. A conversation with Money Distilled newsletter author John Stepek. John, let's talk. And I'll tell you what, let's talk about your absolutely favorite subject. New high after new high after new high. Who wouldn't want to hold the FTSE 100?
Exactly. And we've got another new high today as we're recording.
So exciting.
In fact, actually, I may need to double check this, but Simon French over at Panmure Gordon the other day tweeted out to me saying that if the FTSE manages to close at a new record high 12 times in a row within a month, this will be like the first time that's happened since, I don't know, years and years and years. So that's very exciting. I'll be looking out for that.
What's making it happen? What's making it happen, John?
The fact that fund managers are essentially herd animals and they've seen something hit a new high and they're suddenly like, oh my God, there's a bandwagon that's moving
John,
without me.
I have to interrupt you briefly. We don't call them herd animals. We don't call them like
Oh, yeah,
what
sorry.
we call them is
I forgot.
momentum investors.
Yeah.
Well, we had this conversation before. Momentum investors.
That's the politically correct term.
Okay. So finally, global investors have noticed that the UK is cheap, that Brexit has not been the end of the world, and that there are some really great companies in the UK and they can buy them for significantly less than they can buy companies elsewhere. In fact, even after all these new highs, I think the UK is still at a 19% discount to global peers, right?
Yeah, it's still cheap, and actually it is interesting because I had a quick look. So my go-to for all of these things is the Bank of America Global Fund Manager Survey. It's actually really good sentiment indicator, and it comes out every month. So I look back at the January one for this year, and the UK's been at the bottom for ages. And the January one, it was rock bottom. Global fund managers said that they were more underweight the UK relative to history than any other asset class. And that's like 21 different asset classes. So big underweight, as in they don't like it compared to the benchmark. And then I looked at the same one for last month, and it's basically been the same, February, March, April. May, that's actually changed. They've actually moved some money into UK stocks, and they're now ever so slightly just above average compared to the last 20 years. So that's been there has been a real sentiment shift in a fairly short period of time, and it has pretty much coincided with, the FTSE hitting a new record high. And to be fair, also the kind of move to value, because people have started to get a bit started to think that actually interest rates are going to be higher for longer. So maybe the growth stuff isn't necessarily the thing to stick with anymore. But I do think most of it's actually momentum as well. You just spot something moving and you don't want to be left behind.
John, he respects nobody as much as he respects fund managers. He's all over them. Absolutely. Right. Listen, so we're getting note after note after note from various banks, brokers, etc., telling us what we've been telling you for a long time now, that the UK is cheap and you should buy it. But I do want to point you to one in particular, which is from our podcast regular, James Ferguson. And he has written a note, and I will do a little summary of it and stick it on John's Money Distilled newsletter for you at some point. And it's called Union Jack in the Box, right? This is not an ordinary bull market. This is a British bull market, right? And his argument is that is slightly different to our argument, to be honest. It is that inflation is absolutely out of the picture. He says that as far as he can see, there is very little inflationary pressure left. There's an 18-month contraction in nominal money supply, 2-year stagnation of GDP. There is absolutely no excuse for base rates to be knocking around at this 16-year high of 5.25%. So he thinks that once inflation is out of the picture, and he thinks that everybody will realize that soon, rates have, and I'm quoting here, ample scope to be cut a long way, alleviating the pressure on both indebted retail and commercial property owners, stimulating productive bank growth, and all without threatening a re-acceleration in prices and decloses. No wonder the FTSE has just broken out to a new 6-year high. And so he's looking not just at the cheapness, but at the fact that he expects interest rates to fall quite fast soon. And I did ask him about that, and he said there's just no reason for them to stay high. I still feel, as I think you do, John, that central bankers might be taking the opportunity to try and normalize the idea that rates should knock around 4%, not 1%, and therefore the fall is going to be slightly slower than a lot of other people think.
I mean, I've got a huge amount of respect for James, because he's one of the few people that we know that explicitly got the 2008 crisis right and was warning about deflation even after all the money printing, so he knows what he's talking about. Despite all that, I still struggle to see that happening. And it also depends. I mean, it depends partly what he means by a fast drop in interest rates. I've read some of the note, but not the whole thing. And, if he means it'll get to 4 quicker than everyone's expecting, then that's one thing. But I'm on the camp that says that rates don't go below 3% effectively ever again, as in for a very long time. So I'd be curious to know a bit more about exactly what he's expecting.
All right, I'll give him a call. We'll stick it in the newsletter. But he keeps using the word substantially. The MPC now has a very clear path to cut rates substantially, rejuvenate bank lending, etc., etc. His only concern, of course, is the incoming Labour government and the Bank of England. Will they work together and keep policy relatively tight, unleashing the private sector to go for growth, or will they not? I think we can probably guess the answer to that. But we'll come back to that maybe in 6 months or so. Right, John, anything else you want to say about this wonderful bull market?
No, I think everyone should just sit back and enjoy it.
Now, before we get on to the conversation with John, I want to point you to something we talk about during it that we didn't define and we should have. We talk about Sonia, and he talks about wanting to outperform Sonia. And a lot of you are going to be looking at that and you're going to be thinking, well, what on earth is Sonia? And what it is an interest rate benchmark. It's the average price that banks pay to borrow sterling from each other overnight. So it's just a standard, straightforward measure of basic interest rates. And if you are going to attempt to outperform that, you're just going to be making more than you would in cash, which seems like a good way to run a fund. Right, John?
It's the replacement to LIBOR, because people might have heard of LIBOR.
Okay. Good point. Right. We'll come back to this in our conversation after our conversation with John. Welcome to Merrin Talks Money, a podcast in which people who know the markets explain the markets. I'm Merrin Somerset Webb. Here's my conversation with John Warren, who launched Tellworth Investments in October 2017. Before that, he worked at Cazenove Capital, UBS, and Investec. We begin the conversation with John explaining why the fund he runs, TM Tellworth UK Select, is different to a standard fund.
Collaborate for a greener future at the Bloomberg Green Festival, a groundbreaking celebration of the thinkers, doers, and innovators leading the way. From design and culture to technology, science, and entertainment. Hear from inspirational speakers and immerse yourself in climate solutions. July 10th through 13th in Seattle. Title sponsor, Amazon. Official airline, Alaska Airlines. Get 20% off using promo code RADIO20 at BloombergLive.com/greenfestival.
The Tellworth Fund that I run, the UK Select Fund, is an absolute return fund. So what we are trying to achieve is very consistent, low volatile returns for our investors. And we achieve that by being both long and short shares. We do that by being neutral to the market. So we're not trying to take a big directional bet on the market and basically be stock pickers. So we want to buy stocks that are going up and be short of stocks that are going down and make consistent returns with a very low volatility. And importantly as well, not be correlated to the direction of the market or changes in economic conditions or interest rate cycles, which is clearly a big area for debate at the moment. And really just, we are targeting 8 to 10% returns a year on a consistent basis. That's what we're trying to achieve for our investors.
Okay, that's an extraordinary thing, 8 to 10% a year. Now, when you say absolute return, of course, we're all immediately thrilled because one of our big gripes, me and John, one of our big gripes for the fund management industry as a whole is benchmarking, is the idea that returns are always relative to something, the returns of something else. You're never judging yourself in absolute returns. How much money have you actually made for people year by year by year? It's about, well, I outperformed this benchmark by 0.5%, or I outperformed that benchmark by 1.5%, or whatever it is. And we always look at it and we think, well, hang on a tick. If you are judging yourself relative to something, it's got to be quite hard to outperform it over the long term because you're always looking at it and going, oh God, I'm scared. If you are judging yourself relative to something, it's got to be quite hard to outperform it over the long term because you're always looking at it and going, oh God, I'm scared.
Educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. Educating the mind